Hello everyone, I don't really feel like I need an introduction. I mentioned it a few times in that video. Yeah, I'm the geologist with this project, and I'm not going to tell you how Ice Age ponds formed, because I know it sounds hard to believe, it's not as important as you think. So what I'm going to do is, can you move on the slide please? I'm going to talk about ice ages and the ice age landscape. And I'm going to do it without slides. So we'll start off with, what is an ice age? It's where the Earth is very cold. The Earth has had many ice ages. I'm going to do it without slides. And if I stand on the magic spot, there's a cross on the floor. And face forward without moving, the people at home can see me, albeit in the gloom. So I'm going to stand here. Ooh, I've got pictures. So last ice age. We often talk about the last ice age, but it's not the same thing everywhere. It will have got colder, but in terms of our ice age ponds, we're really talking about either underneath ice or fairly close in the kind of permafrost zone. And the last ice age that really reshaped the landscape in Herefordshire wasn't the super big ice age. If you're hanging around in London, you're talking about the Anglian glaciation about 450,000 years ago. In Herefordshire, we're really interested in the Devedsian glaciation, and we just talk about the last ice age, but there have been lots, and each one is subtly and not so subtly reshaping the landscape. Ice is very energetic but slow, and works like a bulldozer, reshaping, scraping everything as it goes, and then as it retreats, water melting slowly dumps things on the landscape, filling in this newly reprofiled form. And it's that landscape that our ice age ponds sit in, and it's that landscape that we are in today. Can I have the next slide? It's nice having glamorous assistants. So, just to explain about where the ice was, Herefordshire's and where we are now is genuinely, you'd have seen it, it would have been really cold, but it wouldn't actually have been under ice. Like really almost touching. The ice came in, it came down from Wales rather than directly from the north. The ice here came in, whizzed in comparatively, geologically speaking, it was seconds. We're talking a couple of thousand years. Wales and the mountains there would have had the ice for a few tens of thousands of years, but in Herefordshire, the ice came whooshing down the valleys, reshaping everything, spreading out on the floodplain, and then whizzing off again. Looking like that. I didn't even say next slide that time, they can read my mind. And what you would have had is what we call Piedmont Glacier, nice modern pictures, this is not Herefordshire, very cold, and you'd have had the ice going down the valley, where it's narrow, tall and thick, narrow space. Once it reaches the floodplain, it's going to suddenly have loads of space to spread out. If anyone wants to recreate this, that slime stuff you see the youth of today playing with makes a really good glacier, exactly the same process. And it spreads out, slowing down, and then as it melts and retreats, all the stuff it's picked up en route, it's going to start dropping. Water's lazy, doesn't carry it further than it has to. Next slide. So, as we're going to talk about a lot, I think you're going to see about 5 variations of this slide, saying this is the project area. That Piedmont Glacier was only in northwest Herefordshire. So we have a very clearly defined project area. So it went just about as far as the A49, north to south, kind of through Leinster, and just reaching Hereford, but in that corner. But not all of that area actually has the correct deposits. So we're interested in the areas that were mapped by the British Geological Survey as being hummocky moraine, and the next slide should show you some hummocky moraine. They're rounded hummocks. They're just random blobs on the landscape, lovely round curve. One of the descriptions that I think helps is that if you imagine a basket of eggs, these lumps are very random. They're not neatly lined up, they're not organised. And in Herefordshire, they do tend to be, I wouldn't say subtle, but nice and rounded shapes. Definitely not flat is the key feature. And they can be quite big. What these are is our hummocky moraine, and where we find these, we think to ourselves, there's a pond in this, we should be excited about it. The other thing that the ice has deposited, those hummocky moraines are made of glacial sediments. It's sands, it's gravel, it's boulders. We used to call it Boulder Clay because it's clay with boulders in mostly. But geologists like to be specific. So the real term is dimicton, because sometimes there's no clay, sometimes there's no boulders, and it was still deposited by a glacier. So we get a mixture of sediments. The ones for this project we're interested in are Boulder Clay, which in Herefordshire is almost exclusively bright red. At this time of year, you can really see it on every ploughed field because it's bright red. And if you're strolling on a footpath near the ploughed field, you're probably going to see an awful lot of round pebbles on the ground. And those are the boulders in the Boulder Clay. They're not all boulder size, they can be small and pebbly and tiny. And these are usually erratics, which is a rock that's not from round here. That really is the erratic. It's a rock from somewhere else. The other thing we do get, although we don't find much of, are in a small area. We had a big glacial lake, and in lakes, this stuff isn't being deposited in this mixed up mush of boulders and clay and sands and gravels. The lake, everything settles out calmly, creating really nice clay, sometimes layered, and it's that that's really good for making bricks. That flat area is around Letton. You'll notice it's really wet right now, very floody, shall we say. And those ice age ponds are filling up beautifully. Much easier to spot. The other thing you get is, wow, this is moving on without.
It is.
It's really weird. Is boulders. You don't see as many big ones as these are the erratics, they're not from round here. You don't see as many massive ones as this. But if you're walking over the field, if you're not looking at a rock that's kind of red-brown colour, geologists can't always describe rocks as brown and grey, so they're very generous with their colour descriptions. So we're going with red colour, often with a nice sparkle on a sunny day. I mean, not today, but a sunny day. They've got a lovely glittery sparkle to them. That's our local rock, the stuff that's underneath everything deposited by ice. When that gets smudged up by our glaciers, it makes red clay. And so if you look at red clay, you get that. Everything else, you've got this red sparkly rock. That's our local rock. Pretty much everything else is a not from round here category. And it tends to be the little boulders and pebbles that sit. Okay. And the next one. And the other thing you get is absolutely loads of ponds. You're going to see lots of maps with many, many dots. If you were one of my diligent people who sat and looked at aerial photos and first edition maps, you will have found yourself thinking, wow, it's all pond. It's one of the exciting things that we found during the project. I know, as David mentioned, is the Hereford Amphibian and Reptile Trust have been going on for a while now. There's a lot of ponds around here, really old ponds, like really old ponds. I think these might be Ice Age. And we said, okay, well, how many? The answer was nowhere near as many as we really have. It turns out there's a lot of ponds we didn't know about. And they're quite exciting ponds. Next one. Now for this bit, I'm not going to tell you how Ice Age ponds form, mostly because I know someone is going to do a much, much better and more detailed job than I have time for. But for this project, the important thing was how do we define for our project an Ice Age pond? Because what's important is how do you say not Ice Age, the one just outside the hotel, not Ice Age, versus Ice Age, lovely one you can see in the background here. And so what we did was we kind of set up our criteria. No, battery's got, oh no, it's working again. We set up our criteria. So, firstly, is it in an area of glacial deposits? If it's in solid rock, it's not Ice Age. If it's in river deposits, it's not Ice Age. If it's outside the bounds of our most recent glacier, it's not Ice Age. So that's a clear definition. I may add, there is a little bit of blurry edges. Turns out the geological map sometimes isn't quite right. Sometimes it says you're on solid rock and you're stood there with an auger going, I've gone down 6 foot into clay, I'm not stood on solid rock, and I haven't hit the bottom. So around the edges, we were quite generous with where we said no. Next thing, is it a discrete pond? I'm hoping if Dave goes on, I can show you what I mean by a discrete pond. This is where we looked at some of the many, many maps. People who've met me before know I love a good map, and boy did I have lots of maps to play with. So a discrete pond is a pond that's not on a river, because if you dam a little stream or a pebble, you get a little river or stream, you will get a pond. If you decide to create and dig yourself a hole near your ditches that have drained your field, you will get a pond. It is not Ice Age. You made that, or someone in the past made it. So we first said, well, we can't investigate everyone as deeply as we'd like, although we've tried. Is it a discrete pond? No ditches going in, or at least if it is a ditch, we know it's a ditch, we can see it's a ditch. No dams, no nearby rivers. So we said what the rock type underneath is, or at least what the map is saying, what shape is. It doesn't have to be round, just has to be a pond in its own right. If you poured water in, it's not going to fall out over a man-made feature. You can see this a lot. Next, can you just click again? We use some really detailed LiDAR, and it's great. These are contours. This is just one field. It's only about, well, a little bit over 500 metres across, something like that. And in it are these 4 really clear circles. For those who are familiar with contours, this looks really, really steep. These are 10-metre contours and 1-metre contours. So it's not quite as terrifying as it looks. There aren't 4 pits. They're just ponds, or in fact 3 ponds. So we look and we say, is it a clear depression? Can I see a link joining 2 ponds together? Probably someone trying to drain their field. Or can I see the streams and ditches? This is really helpful. This LiDAR, lasers from planes, very James Bond. This LiDAR gets rid of all the messy vegetation, which us geologists would like to remove, just so we can see what's happening. We put it back, and the LiDAR does that for us. Next one. And then the last thing we're after is, has it got peat? If we find peat, we will jump up and down, get extremely excited and say, we've done it, this is a good sign. And again, we've got someone coming to talk a lot more about the peat we found. I've moved off my spot. So the peat we found, we took it over. If you can imagine the kind of thing you'd use, for, I say you, kind of thing people use for testing cheese. So you push it into the ground, you twist it round, you pull it out, and then if you were testing cheese, you break a bit off and say how nice it was, or not. For us, we push it into the ground, we twist it round, pull it out, and go clay, or clay, or clay, and then just occasionally, wow, we've hit peat. Quite often it's clay, 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 clay. Oh, there's going to be no peat here. I'll just do one more just in case. Oh, we found peat. Often this isn't mapped, but occasionally the Geological Survey helped us by mapping its peat. So when we find it, it's nice, it's dark, it's brown, it's crumbly. We get excited because where peat forms, we know that these take millimetres in hundreds of years. Peat takes ages to turn up. It's why people are trying to protect what we have now. If we find it, this is not a pond someone dug in their garden this year, last year, or 20 years, or even 50 years ago. If you are finding peat, it's a pond that's been there a really long time. Not all ponds have it, not all Ice Age sort of depressions have it, but where we have it, we go, yes, we've hit it. If we see it on the geological map, we say, going to say that's an Ice Age pond. If it's on the geological map and there are ponds nearby and they don't have it, we go, well, all the ones around it said, so we're going to pretend that they're all the same and then persuade people to go out and get head to foot covered in mud checking this out. Amazingly, there are people willing to do it. Next slide. So how do we find an Ice Age pond? With a great deal of patience and loads of friendly landowners. So we get fantastic volunteers, although they were stuck at home, to look at first edition maps and then look at modern maps and say, is there a pond on the first edition? Is it still there? That's an idea of has it gone? Then they looked at satellite imagery, they looked at things like Google Earth and those kind of things. And so can we see the depression? Is there some kind of representation of it? And then we said, okay, now we know that we think there's a pond there, can we go and visit it? And so we sent them out to do the walking surveys. It was nice weather, but again, still no one was allowed to go out together, so they went for nice strolls in lovely lanes and paths, bridleways, and they tried to see if they could spot any of these sites. and this is that over 1,000 ponds. A few we found no sign of whatsoever, and it was early spring, so they would probably have been there if they were still there. Sometimes these things are wrong. The people who do the maps are thorough, but not flawless. We found some mistakes and things that aren't there that were there. Then they've gone out, they've had a good look, and they say, okay, we've got a pond. Then we start tracking down landowners. Really difficult, time consuming. It's great when someone sticks their hand up and goes, I think I've got one of them in my garden, or I know the man who owns the next field. We like those people. If you are those people, thanks so far. If you know more ponds, come and see us. We'd love to speak to you. And then we get the landowners and we say, can we send some volunteers out to survey? And the volunteers, again, don't mind going out, doing some surveying. They look and see what's in the pond. They come back to us and say, this is what we found. Here's our picture. Here's our sketch. We've gone out, having been trained, and we think you've got an Ice Age pond. And we all get very excited. If they find exciting things, we get some ecologists out. They send us pictures. But that's how we identify them, and we found loads. The problem we've got is too many ponds. Not enough volunteers to go around them yet. Certainly not enough time. On the day. And just to show you that the different methods, you can't just use one method to try and identify all the ponds. This is Norton Cannon. Really nice ponds here in a little orchard. Can you go to the next? What you've got is here all the different data sources working together. We got some satellite imagery and we went, is that a pond according to a satellite? Like, can I see it? Yes. We've got LiDAR saying, is it a sort of discrete depression? Yes. And someone else has said, I walked past it. There's a load of water in it. It looks like a pond. And together, those data, they often overlap, but they are not necessarily all picking up the same things, which is why it's really good to have lots of sources of data to tell us about this resource. It's a lot bigger than we thought. So you can see different coloured dots. Those are different sources of information to say, is this a pond?